used to think that I wasn't a real designer because I didn't have work that was flashy or viral or award-winning. But that's when I came to realize that design is so much more than just the visuals. Today, I'm going to be breaking down some untold truths that I've discovered over the last 6 years that I've been a graphic designer in today's creative hot take. I'm here to validate designs and designers who don't appear on the first pages of Pinterest or who aren't pinned to portfolio mood boards. I'm talking about the majority of design work which simply doesn't make it into the spotlight. Things like the boring nitty-gritty back and forth, the endless details. I'm talking specifically about graphic design here, but I'm sure this applies to other design fields as well. So the first creative hot take is not all designers will be able to work in a creative agency. That's not to say you can't. I definitely think you should. It's a really good experience. But what I'm trying to say is not all designers are cut out for that kind of work. I remember when I left my ad agency job a couple of years ago to the corporate job that I'm currently in now, I was told by a senior that this kind of job that I'm currently in would probably be better suited for me. Now, at the time, I was quite offended by that because I assumed that they meant that I wasn't creative enough. But now I'd like to take a different spin on it, which is that some designers are meant to work in these creative design agencies and they thrive in that environment, whereas some designers are better suited for corporate. I think it's just that the designers who work in agencies are celebrated a bit more because they do inherently have more interesting work. But I think that designers who work in things like marketing or communications departments of corporations, whether they're big or small, it could even be like a graphic designer working in a furniture company. You know, I'm talking that level. Designers are needed in both of these fields, and the requirements and the ways of thinking and ways of working are quite different to both. I think some of it as well is about what kind of work-life balance do you want to have, because I feel like if you work in an agency, inherently you are kind of signing away more of your time. For me as well, I like working in corporate design because it gives me more creative headspace to give towards my own personal work, whether it's things like YouTube or my own artwork. Although the designs you create in a corporate design job may not necessarily be the prettiest, that brings me on to good design isn't just about aesthetics. When we're starting out a project, one of the first things we tend to do is look for design inspiration, which is a completely normal thing to do. So websites like Pinterest, Behance, other design websites. Having said that, that actually might not be the best place to start when you're looking for a design or looking to start a design project. Sometimes beauty can be quite a big distraction. Of course, we all want things to look beautiful, but this could come at the cost of the actual design and the feasibility of it. What I'm trying to say is that not all designs need to have the same aesthetic appeal or sensibility. You have to think about what is the design actually for. When it comes to design, it's really important to think about other things than the visuals, such as usability, clarity, feasibility, and the systems that go into actually making this. All of these things are part of good design. And if anything, when you start designing right at the onset of a project, you should apply the principle audience first way more often. I remember back in architecture school, there was this running joke between tutors that students would not put people in their renders. I don't know if this is the case now, but we just didn't used to put people in our renders because they used to ruin the renders. It would take away from the beautiful drama of our rendering. And it kind of goes to show how much designers valued their own ego over the actual purpose of the design. For example, minimalism is an architectural style that I hate, not because it's a bad style, but because I think it's gone so far to the point that sometimes it's just not usable. They really don't think about the end users. For example, our fridge and freezer doors are impossible to open without somehow tearing off my fingernail. I'm a very clumsy person, so for me, minimalism just doesn't work. What works for the user is honestly the most important thing. Making something easy and intuitive is actually more difficult than you think, and it probably should have way more time dedicated to it than what the visuals and aesthetics look like. It's also important to think about what the client wants for the audience. So it depends who you're designing for, whether you're designing as an agency for a brand who needs to promote their product or get more people to buy something, or whether you're working for an NGO and you're trying to get your audience to build trust. It's really important to research audience thoroughly before diving into design, and also not to make any assumptions. So let's say you've researched your audience, you're good to go, you've started designing. Cool. But please remember that systems matter. So what do I mean by that? Well, There is nothing more frustrating than taking over the work of another designer and finding the pop-up 16 files are missing, or having to trawl through a bunch of unnamed Photoshop layers, or chasing them to upload files because they've not done that. Template your files. Organize your files. Hand over your files. How the behind the scenes works in design is also a part of good design. And I think this is something that designers forget. And I get it. You're time crunched. You know, you have a deadline and yeah, of course you don't have time to name files. But once the deadline is over, at least you can take the time to go through the files, clean them, clear out unused footage, or clear out all the layers that you don't need. Make copies, archive things. It's so important to be able to pass on a design legacy because designs should work beyond the designer who's designed them. Okay, cool. So now let's say you've researched the audience, you've made your design, you've made sure that you've cleaned up your design and you've created your handover document. You may just find that when you look back at the project, you find that it's not exactly portfolio worthy. And you know what? Not every project is portfolio worthy. Now, what do I mean by that? You kind of have to take it with a pinch of salt because, first of all, it depends on what portfolio you're making. Are you making it for a specific job? If it's for a specific job, then specific projects might be required to meet the requirements. Not every portfolio will apply to every job, by the way. You may end up having to make different portfolios, which is why I recommend you have a master portfolio with all of your projects on it, and then you can kind of cut and paste things to apply for different jobs as you need. Don't make the mistake of putting every single project into your portfolio. Understandably, it may be because you don't have enough projects, so you feel like putting everything in might help, but that actually detracts from what you'd want. Most hiring designers or HR, whoever is hiring, they don't have time, right? They're looking at these things for like 10 seconds max. Choose a few good designs, 1 to 3 max, I would say, and expand on them. Don't be afraid to put text in, but make sure all of that text is relevant to what you're saying. Don't write essays as well. Don't just talk about the visuals, but talk about things in this format: problem, process, impact, and insight. So the problem is obviously the task that you are required to do. The process is the process that you went through to complete that problem. The impact is what result did it have? And the insight is whatever lessons you learned from the project, as well as the further outputs that were produced from the impact. In conclusion, Steve Jobs said it best. Good design doesn't scream for attention. It just works, making things feel smooth, simple, and spot on without you even noticing. I think this one example is kind of random, but it sort of works in this context. I was watching the making of the Friends series, and I think it was one of the production designers. They were talking about how when they set up the Friends Cafe, obviously they dismantle everything after every season, but when they're putting the cafe up, every time they film an episode, they change ever so slightly things on the counter. So they'll change the number of beans in the coffee bag. You know, they'll make it half full and then they'll make it a quarter full in the next episode. They'll change the way the cakes are rotated, or they'll change the number of slices. So it actually looks like it's a functioning coffee shop. And all of those things contribute to the idea that this is a real coffee shop. And it's one of those things that honestly, I was blown away by, because it's the kind of detail that as a designer, you should be paying attention to. But as a viewer, it doesn't even register in your brain. But it's exactly that kind of attention to detail which allows for a seamless experience. So yes, the projects you've completed that may not be the most visually aesthetic, put them in your portfolio, because if they have impacted you in any way, if you have learned any lessons, if you have gotten amazing results out of them, or if you have grown as a designer because of those projects, they are so worth pushing in your portfolio. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and also let me know what kind of subject you'd like me to talk about next on Creative Hot Take. I will see you in 2 weeks for another video.